Hello everyone, and welcome to part 5 of this tutorial series in which we are recreating the Apple Fitness Plus informational overlay. We're going to be doing it using React, HTML, advanced CSS, and some TypeScript. In this part, the burn bar, this beautiful purple pink animating thing that tells you how well you're doing compared to the other users in the class. It's got a lot going on. An animation in the middle. It slides left and right, reacting to the users in real time. It's responsive. It's using some beautiful blending, some complex curves, a lot of great stuff going on here. We are going to recreate it using SVG masks, CSS blend modes, inline styles in React. We're going to do it using, what else? We're doing CSS animations. It's a lot, and there's no time like the present, so let's get after it. Okay, obviously the first thing we need to do is create our files. So in our components directory, we're going to create a new file. We're going to type burn bar /burn bar.tsx. This will create the burn bar subdirectory for us. Then we're going to create a new file in there, call it burn bar.css. And then on our TSX, we're going to take advantage of that React boilerplate app I mentioned earlier, link around here somewhere. So you just type React props and it will give you the boilerplate. I'm going to call this burn bar. And the one prop we need to pass is going to be called placement. Placement isn't going to be a number, it's a string, it's going to be a number between 0 and 1. Now, we don't want to have to deal with what our burn bar looks like if someone upstream accidentally passes down a 2 or a -3. So we're going to do a quick bit of math to our placement to make sure that it doesn't do anything we don't expect. Just cutting and pasting in some code here. This is clamped placement, which uses a combination of the min and the max math functions to make sure that our placement is never greater than 1 or less than 0. Before we go any further, I want to move some assets around. So let's go to our assets folder and select everything that says burn bar. We're going to cut those. And here in our burn bar folder, we're going to create a new assets folder. And we're going to paste everything into there. We're just moving all of the burn bar images into the burn bar folder. Again, in the future, if you wanted to make the burn bar transportable, you can create a package JSON, and then you would be able to pass this around much more easily, and you don't have to worry so much about relative pathing. So just a bit of housekeeping before we really get after this. First thing we want to do is create this background. So create a top level div. We'll change this to a div, give it a class name of burn bar. Very clever. Below that, we're going to create a class name of main bar, which is what I'm calling the brightly colored center section. Believe it or not, that's enough HTML to really get started. Let's import the CSS. Save that. Let's go over to our app. And where we have our temporary burn bar, let's actually put in our real burn bar. So we delete this, type burn bar. It'll automatically add the import for you, and you can set the placement to 0.5. This will become dynamic, but right now that's arbitrary and is a good place to start. Save that up. Now, of course, nothing has happened because all we have is a couple of empty divs. So let's put this burn bar over here and open up burnbar.css and start laying in some foundations. First thing up is the burn bar itself. I want to set that to an aspect ratio of 5, which means 5:1. And when we get a little further down the road, I'll explain exactly why that ratio is correct. We're going to set the position to relative. I'm going to set the width to 100%. Now, moving down, we're going to go to the main bar, and we're going to set the background image here. This is that main image, the main core. It's one of the assets I provided. So we'll go URL, assets, and we'll go to burnbar main.svg. And let's save this. Okay, not getting very much yet. Let's set the height here to 100%. There you go. You can see our image being layered into place. Now, it's not fitting correctly. So what we need to do is set the background size. Let's set that to cover. So you can see it's now scaled up because it's been told to cover it. Maintain the proportions, but cover it. To do that, it had to scale it up, which pushes it off to the right. That's okay. That's exactly what we want. We can actually start moving toward making this dynamic now. Let's head back over to burnbar.tsx and do some inline styling. So what we want to do here is go style equals pair of curly brackets. We're passing in an object, and let's do background position. Notice the camel case because we're in React. It's not the dash that you would have done in CSS, one of those little annoyances. $, open the brackets, curly brackets. Now we're dealing with dynamic text. And we're going to say placement. And we're outside of the brackets, we're going to add percentage. And then we're going to add center. Center is the vertical component of this. And since we don't want to mess with that, we're just going to leave it right in the middle. Let's see what happens. Surprise, nothing much happened. That is because its placement is between 0 and 1. Also, we should be using clamped placement. My mistake. Still, nothing changes. So that is because placement is between 0 and 1, and CSS is thinking in percentages. So let's multiply clamped placement times 100. Now it's in the center. Remember, that's because we set it as a placement of 0.5. So now if we change this to say 0.25, it should move to the left. It doesn't. It moves it to the right. And that is because the offset position is being, because of how offset position and background position is calculated. So we actually need, let's surround clamped placement with some parentheses and actually say 1 minus clamped placement times 100. There you go. Now if we go back to app.tsx, we're at 0.25. Let's change it to 0. That's full left. Change it to 1. That's full right. Let's change it to 100 because we coded defensively. Nothing changes. Let's change it to negative 100. It bumps to the left, but doesn't exceed its bounds because we coded defensively. Pretty cool. Let's put that back to 0.5 and start figuring out how to round the edges on this. So the next thing we need to do is put in a mask. Now, let's jump over to Illustrator and see why and how this works. So earlier I told you to have an aspect ratio of 5. That's because when I created this graphic, I created it at an aspect ratio of 5 to 1. This is 20 pixels tall, 100 pixels wide, 5 to 1. Okay. So let me hide all the layers except for our main burn bar, which is the one we were talking about. First thing to note is these little boxes up here. These are to define the edge of the SVG so that it fits correctly, because as you can see, the curve here doesn't come up to the top of the shape we want. So they're basically registration marks. The next thing we want to do is the main mask. This is what we're about to put in. And you can see it's got these curves here that align to the bars on here. So if we were to clip the pink to the black, we would get the shape we want. And that's exactly what we're going to do. This size here, this is in the exact same sizing. So that's how it fits so well. So let's jump back and bring this in as a mask. Remember the shape. Black is visible, white is invisible. So we'll go into the CSS and we're going to say mask image URL assets burn bar, and we're going to call this the main mask. Now it's working, but it's not quite working right. You can see it got clipped off at the edge here, but it didn't get quite clipped off, but it also messed up over here on the right. So we need to set the mask position. I'm going to set that to center and center. And then you can see what's happening is the mask is actually repeating. So we want to do mask repeat. And of course we want no repeat. Look at that. We have a very cool complex shape that we can control. Now, just for fun, let's put in a transition of 0.5 seconds, 0.5s ease. That way, when we go over here to our app and we change 0.5 to 0.25 and we save it, we get some animations. And look at the complexity we're achieving already. We have this shape that animates around, but how would anyone think to do? I mean, that's such a complex thing. You could be doing SVG morphs, by the way. That's a way I consider it as well, but didn't end up going there. Okay, so let's compare that to what we have in our source image. Let's put in this graphic there in the middle. Because this bar works for all sorts of workouts, you want to be able to pass in the graphic that goes in the circle there. So we're going to go all the way up to app.tsx, and we're going to import the activity icon. From assets, and I actually called it tinydancer.gif. And we're going to pass tinydancer into our burn bar, which will cause errors because we haven't done that yet. So we're going to say icon equals. We're going to save that, and everything's going to crash for a second. Don't worry about it. Let's go back to the burn bar, and let's add icon and make it a string. Put that here as well. And within the burn bar, in its own div, we're going to create bar icon. And that is going to be our image, with the source being icon, and give it an alt, and activity icon. Save that up. We have a couple of problems, of course, but there's our little dancing man. I also did that in Blender very quickly with Mixamo assets. So just a fun little bonus thing. Actually, before we move on, let's nest this image in a div, because I'm going to do a cool little trick to register that image where I want it. So let's head over here to burnbar.css. .burn icon. Now we're going to set the burn icon bar icon, my bad, burn bar icon, and we're going to change this to a display flex justify content center. I'm going to set this to a max width of 0 pixels. Okay, great. Now it's still breaking things because it's taking up space and messing with our math. So we're going to set this to position absolute. We're going to set this to a top of 0. Okay, so it might not look like it, but we've got that pretty much exactly where we want it. Let's go back over to burnbar.tsx, and let's copy this style that we created for the main bar. And let's put it down here into the bar icon. Now we need to change a few things. First of all, we're not going to set the background position. We're going to set the left position. And that doesn't require a second variable there, center. We don't need that. And now it's dead center. So we have set this to a left of 50% because that's the clamped placement math. That means that 0 pixel icon is exactly centered, and this div, this subdiv, and the image are centered within it. So that's aligned perfectly. Now we have to do some more math in a second here to make it line up at other points besides 0.5, but we'll get to that in just a second. So let's first go to our bar icon div, and let's put a background on. Now, we should probably use vars for this, but I actually am going to cut and paste in the a linear gradient that has the correct colors that I've sampled. and we can see some problems right away. So this just needs to be round. So instead of border radius of 10, rem, something bigger than it will ever be. Great. I said aspect ratio of 1. I said a height of 100%. Now we're going to mess with the image. Bar, icon, image, object fit, scale down. So I'll proportionally scale down to fit the component. We're going to go max width 100%. Min width 100%. We'll set this to position relative. The bar icon needs to have a height of 100%. There we go. It didn't have a height, so everything was heighting to 0 and everything was chaos. So let's go now back down to our bar icon div. We're going to go display, flex, align items, center, justify content, center. That'll put everything right there in the middle. Our image is now a little bit too big, so let's actually set the max width to 70 and the min width to 70. There, he looks more correct. And then we're going to go up here, and this is taking up the full height. If you look at our source image, it doesn't take up the full height. So let's set the height here to 70%. I just need to align items center. There we go. So that's looking pretty darn close. But let's go back over to the app.tsx and change our progress from 0.5 to 0.25. Okay, a couple of obvious problems have happened here. So let's go back to our burnbar.tsx. We're now trying to get everything lined up at 0.25. So background position works by an offset that requires this 1 minus, but that is not how left works. Okay, so now we're at 25% to the left. We were to inspect that element. You can see the inline style says left 25%. But what's happening here? They're not lining up. For easy math, let's go all the way to 0. Everything should be fully left aligned. And there you see the problem. Our dancing guy is fully left aligned to the object, as he should be. But our graphic doesn't seem to be going all the way over. Why is that? That's because in Illustrator, if we bring our burn bar back, you can see when it's set to the full 0 position that we are not actually all the way over. And that's because in Apple's graphic, this rounded corner, this is as far to the left as it gets. So I have set up the SVG files so that the center point is 20 pixels from the edge. So where the background graphic spans between 0 and 1, the actual placement here is between 20 and 80. So we need to add a little bit of math to fix that. So we're going to take the clamped placement. Now between 0 and between 20 and 80 is actually the middle 60 pixels. So let's take this and multiply it by 0.6. Okay, that's fine. But that's going to put it between 0 and 0.6. So now let's add that 0.2. And now it aligns pretty perfectly. And if I go back to app.tsx and change this to 1, or I change it to 0.8, things look great. Now let's go back over to burnbar.css and bring this transition out into a var. So we're going to go up here, create a variable called transition, and it's going to be 0.5 seconds ease, and that's so that we can recycle. So I'm going to say var-transition. I'm going to copy this to the bar icon. Now, when we go back to app.tsx and we change this to 0.5, everything slides along. And we've already pretty much completely recreated the burn bar. but not quite. First of all, the real burn bar has a glow. And second of all, what you can't see when in this still that I've got is that there's a wash that animates over the top. So we're going to do that next. Okay, back to burnbar.tsx, and right here above the main bar, let's create a div called animated glow. And within it, let's create glow overlay. And let's copy into glow overlay the inline styles that we have here for the burn bar. All right. Clean up this document real quick. There you go. So we have animated glow and glow overlay. Let's go back to our burn bar.css. So I want to start with the glow overlay. That's the inner portion. I actually want to use a gradient. So I'm going to go glow overlay. And we're going to do background. I'm going to do a linear gradient. And I want to do this at a 70-degree angle. In case you're wondering why 70, because that is what I guesstimate Apple is doing. I'm going to go transparent. Transparent. White. Transparent. Transparent. I know you can do this with percentages. I'm just being lazy. So there's a linear gradient that's going to be transparent, transparent, white, and transparent. Of course, when we save that, nothing happens because this needs to have a width and height of 100%. 100% needs to be absolutely positioned. It needs to be topped at 0. And left at 0. So I want to tweak the glow overlay a little bit more. Now, the nature of how these things work is that we need the background size to be bigger so we can move it around without jumps. So let's go with background size. We want it bigger on the width, not the height. So we're going to go 2, 100%, 100%. That stretches out our background a bit. Now we're going to go and create an animation. So let's go down here and do a little bit of CSS animation at keyframes. Okay, we're going to call this slide background because that's what we're going to do. We're going to slide the background. So at 0% on our animation, we want the background position here to be 100% and 50%. So all the way off to the side, offset all the way to the side, and then offset, and then in the middle. So at 100%, we want to offset to the other side. Background position, negative 100%, and 50%. Now we got to go up here and apply that animation. So we're going to go animation, and we're going to say slide background, and we want it to go for 2 seconds. Linear, we don't need to ease anyway because it's looping. We don't want it easing it out, and we want it to loop infinitely. All right, now that's looking good. I mean, motion-wise, it's doing some cool stuff. Let's go up here to above the glow overlay. We have that animated glow div. Let's start doing some stuff there. Animated glow. And let's put a blend mode on this. How about we do a mix blend mode, and I'm going to do plus lighter. You can try some of the other options if you'd like to. When we save this, watch how it changes the way that that white interacts with the background behind it. It really makes it punchier. Okay, so now we have the animated wash, but the animated wash is masked. It's masked twice. So where before we used the image and its transparency effectively as one of the masks and then a mask, Now we need to use two different masks, and that is why we did the nested div. So let's start with the animated glow. And we're going to do a mask image. We've done this before. And for this mask image, we're going to use the burn bar glow mask. Conveniently named, right? We're going to do the mask position of center. We're going to do the mask size of cover. We're going to do the mask repeat of no repeat. Now we haven't put this in the right place, so we're going to add a position of absolute. Top, you know this by now, 0, left, 0, width 100%, and a height of 100%. So that's fun. You can actually see the wrong mask. And if we were to put a transition in here, copy and paste our transition var, and go back to app.tsx, and change this, you can see it animate. Let's change this to 0.05. So you can see that the mask doesn't move, but the objects within it too. That'll be more obvious here in a second, because we want to do another mask. So let's take all this mask information here and copy it down into the glow overlay. Or we use a different mask. We're going to use the burn bar bloom mask. And mask repeat, no repeat, mask size, cover. I think that's everything. Oh, we don't want the mask position. That's going to be set dynamically. And if it's stumping you for a second there, like it did with me, the problem is over here in the burn bar, we actually set the background position, where what we need to set is the mask position. There we go. So now as we move this around, you see all that complicated glow moves around with it. Of course, that's popping because we need to put our animation or our transition in one more place. And that's at the glow overlay. Fantastic. That's a pretty sophisticated bit of UI right there, just using React, HTML, and CSS. It looks very cool. Now I want to clean this up, plus it just a little bit. This glow is a bit obnoxious, and that's because this white is so poppy. I'm going to take this down to about a 0.7. Save to see if I like that better. That looks a lot more like what I expect it to look like. Let's mess with it just a little bit more. Call it maybe 0.55. Again, I'm eyeballing it. Fantastic. Now, almost done. Making great progress. There's going to be a little bit of cutting and pasting to do to get this outer glow that's there, whether or not the animation is. So we are going to copy our main bar and rename it glow bar. Keep everything else the same. Now we're going to go over here to our CSS, and we're going to copy our main bar and duplicate the style there. And change the class to glow bar. And all we really need to do now is add a position absolute. You know the drill by now. But we also want to change the from main to glow, the SVG here. And we want to change the mask to glow mask. Put this to the left. Get a width of 100%. And there, you can see it's subtle, but it's glowing back behind the bar. I'm going to zoom in again here. Ooh, that was a lot. I told you it would be, but look what we've built. It's animating, it's responsive, it's reactive, controllable. It's just, it's beautiful. I'm very proud of what we've put together here. But the more complex something is, the more ways there are to approach it. So I'm really hoping that someone's going to jump into the comments and blow my mind with some amazing different technique we could have done to achieve the same results or even better. I know there are ways to plus this. One way you might want to explore is how we might have used the SVG morph capabilities in the Green Sock animation plugin. It's a wonderful set of tools, and that might have been an interesting way to approach this. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll try to get to as many as we can. Next week, we're going to revisit the video player component. Next week, am I dropping these weekly? Next time, we're going to revisit our video player component and put it to work. And we're going to have it drive an external metadata JSON file so that when my silly animated guy in our video says this or that, the interface reacts accordingly. It's going to be very cool. Things are going to really start living and breathing in the next part of this series. So stick with me, and I'll see you next time.